Hi, welcome back to Camp K9. I'm out in the conservatory. So I have been really productive out here, as you can see. My conservatory, it feels so great in here. It really does. There's that warmth, that fresh composty smell, and of course, if you've got tomatoes, you just can't resist getting a bit of tomato smell on your hands as well. Now these tomatoes are doing really well. I potted these on quite some time ago, and then everything else has been potted on, or seeds have been sown. But I have to admit, I did neglect one tray of tomato seedlings. We're going to go and have a look at them now and see what we can do about them. So look at these poor seedlings here. I've got a whole tray of these. Now I've already pulled out some and repotted them on, but as you can see, they've got themselves into a bit of a state. And this is simply because I've left them. But there are other seedlings that are not as forgiving as tomatoes. So we're going to see what we can do about these. Now, when you put something on, quite often the plant will go into shock. It's been in a nice little cozy sleeping bag in its little pod, and you release it into this new environment with this new compost or soil, and it goes into a little bit of shock. It goes into a bit of shutdown whilst it's recovering down underneath. Now, there are some things you can do to reduce the shock. And this morning in my rush, because we all make mistakes, this morning in my rush to get all of those seedlings potted up, I realised I'd run out of compost in the conservatory, in the greenhouse, and I nipped outside and I grabbed a bag from outside and I brought it in and I started potting on the first lot of seedlings. And as I put my hand into the soil, I was thinking, oh God, this soil's really cold. It's been outside, and it really is cold compared with that soil that I was just using a minute ago. And of course, after I put the little seedlings into their little new beds, I realised that the soil was the compost was a little bit too cold for them and put them into some extra shock. Let's have a closer look. So, can you see how, let's compare them. So let's look over here. So this is what the seedlings were kind of looking like, but as you remember, they were drooping over with loads and loads of roots coming out of their stems. You know, when people say, you probably watch some other videos where they say that when you're potting on your seedlings, you can take all these off all the way up to here, plant all the way up to the neck, because every hair on the stem is a potential root. Well, there you go. This is one that's been neglected, and this poor little seedling is desperately trying to create roots to seek for some nutrients, because all it's got to live on is this tiny little pod of soil in here. So it's trying to find, if it had gone into this one, it would have tried to find soil in there. If it got down into my water tray, it might have been drinking direct from the water. But yeah, see these little things. So those seedlings have been looking like this. They were actually in a worse state of this because I started on the other end of the tray where they were the worst. And then I brought my compost in from outside, and was thinking as I was potting it, wow, this stuff's cold. And of course it was cold to my hands, but to these darling little seedlings, it was freezing, absolutely freezing. And see how this has drooped like crazy. And it doesn't look like it's, and here, even this bigger one is sagged going, oh my goodness, it's so cold. I don't like the cold. This one, poor thing, has toppled over completely. Now I'm showing you this, not as an example of what to do, but how to kind of avoid doing these things. So having realised my mistake, I boiled the kettle. And I thought, what's the quickest way of warming up this bag of compost? So I boiled the kettle and I opened the bag up, ripped the bag up completely, poured the kettle water all the way over that, and then used my hands to mix it all up and warm up the soil much better. And it came up to a much nicer temperature than what it had been previously. And here we go. This is the result of the ones that I potted on with the warmer soil. So I'm still expecting them to go into a little bit of shock because they do. But can you see, for some reason I managed to plant these ones a little bit deeper. This is the height that you should plant them to. We're going to go through that in a minute. Right up to their necks. These ones I didn't quite plant deep enough. But can you see, just from having warmer soil, compost, to be transplanted in, I've been much kinder to them and they are much happier for it. Don't worry too much about these guys and don't feel too sorry for them. Yes, I was a very neglected mum in a rush and made a mistake, but they're exhausted right now. But in this nice warm conservatory, they'll be feeling a lot better soon. And by tomorrow, they should have perked their heads up and they will be doing okay. But there are ways to avoid this. So typically, I have just gone and run out of this compost again. So this bag is nearly empty now. It's just typical. So I've gone and got another bag. And this time, I've bunged it in the sink with some water, with some hot water on it. But I'm going to cut it open and see if it's warm enough. And if it's not, I'm going to use the kettle technique again on it and warm it up with the boiled water. So let me go and check those and then we'll look about how to actually put them into their new pots. Okay. Kettle's boiling. Hold on, let me stop the kettle. So, my favourite tool for getting these little seedlings out of here is a palette knife. They just seem to be absolutely perfectly shaped and designed to get the little seedlings out of here. Pop, as simple as that. So when I am planting seeds in these pots, I put multiple seeds in because one, I'm not convinced that they're all going to germinate. And as you can see, they mainly do. But also, some of them are stronger than others. And if I had neglected this tray any longer, what would have happened I would have lost quite a few of these. And anything can happen. And sometimes you do find that you've forgotten a tray or life takes over and you find that you forgot to water or you forgot to turn the temperature off or you forgot to turn the temperature back on again. And some of the plants will survive and some of them will pass away. But when you get to this stage, you've kind of got to decide what you're going to keep and what you're not at this stage. So, oops. I've got a different tablecloth on here and it's playing around with the tripod. So, out of these three, I'm feeling the stalks. So you've got to look at the leaves and see how strong the leaves look. The darker coloured leaves will be stronger than the lighter colour leaves. These leaves are your seedling leaves, these ones here, so just ignore these. It's these ones at the top you're going to be looking at. So this is not an good example because obviously I've neglected this poor little plant. But out of these, this one has got the weakest stem. So I know it feels really awful here, but we're going to we're going to get rid of that one. And we're going to be left with these ones here. Now, these are the two that are left. And what we're going to do is we are going to be planting right up to the top here. So we're just going to nip off all the leaves that are lower than those top ones there. So now all of this stem here can turn into roots and basically continue what it's already started through its neglection. And we're going to bury it in a pot up to there. Now, you might be wondering how we're going to bury all of that into a pot. We're going to deal with that little bit next. Okay, so I've got my little pot. Now, you can plant, if you're a bit earlier with your seedlings than I am, you could go a bit smaller on this pot, or equally, you could go a little bit larger if you wanted to. I have gone a little bit larger on some of the others. So, how do we get this buried up to its neck in this pot when it's clearly a lot taller than the pot? Right, here we go. Stay tablecloth, stay still. Right. Now I'm not going to split these two up because they are joined. I could split them up if I wanted to, but equally this process I could lose one of these plants. And when I plant out into the garden, I will probably choose between the two at that point. So what I'm trying to do is I am finding the way that the plants most naturally, and tomatoes are very forgiving, curl up into there we go. Okay, so what I've done is can you see this? I've wrapped this in on itself. That's how it seems to want to go. Then I'm going to get my warmed compost, place my warmed compost around it, give it a bit of... Now, because you've curled it back on itself, although you do want the roots to be touching the soil, you do need to push it down, but just be aware that you are pushing those roots and that stem against itself and it's curled up. So although you need to push it down, don't push it down too forcefully because you could snap that stem. Now, where are my two plants? Let's just slightly separate that one from this one. There we go. Now that warm soil won't put them into too much shock, and they are now planted up to their necks. Oops, don't look at the side of that pot. It's a reused pot. So there we go. So obviously these are neglected plants, so they're looking not the best, but you'll be surprised how well they will recover. And watch for some of my later videos to find out how well they do. And finally, before we put them back into the conservatory, we're going to give them a good little water. That again, I've done that with warm water rather than cold water, just to prevent their shock. And there we go. Those ones are ready to go back into the conservatory again. And these are the ones that I've got left. I'm going to move on to doing them next. And finally, of course, don't forget your labels. If you do, you'll end up like me. I've got 4 there. I failed to label. can't remember for the life of me what they are. We'll figure it out. Never mind. It'll be a surprise. Until next time, guys. Keep growing.